welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to our second industry research seminar. Today we have a fantastic talk prepared by Tracy Costello, who I will introduce in a moment, on the topic of building a resume for industry. This series is meant to help Gladstone trainees successfully launch a career in industry, from exploring careers all the way to negotiating an offer. So I'm going to now introduce the speaker for today, Tracy Costello, PhD, who is the Director of Postdoctoral Affairs and Graduate Student Development at the University of South Florida, the other USF. She earned her doctorate in biomathematics and biostatistics and human and molecular genetics from the University of Texas MD Anderson UTHealth Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences. During her postdoctoral training at MD Anderson Cancer Center, Tracy got involved with postdoc affairs, including the National Postdoctoral Association, and subsequently transitioned to staff positions in academia and industry. She runs a consultancy, Coach for Postdocs, to provide career development workshops and keynotes for universities, professional societies, and nonprofits. She also serves as the executive coach for STEMPeers and as a reviewer on study sections for the NIH and the NSF. Thank you so much, Tracy, for bringing your expertise to Gladstone, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the very generous introduction. I am thrilled to get to talk to you guys today about resumes for non-academic roles. Although some academic, so I should probably say non-faculty roles. Most recent job statistics I've seen for the 70,000 postdocs in the US are that about 40% go into an academic job of some kind and about 40% go into industry. The other 20% are a mix of government, nonprofit, entrepreneurial, et cetera. And some of those we saw in the poll, so I'm glad that that was there. And in reality, though, you're going to use resumes for pretty much everything except for those faculty roles, which is a slim 10% of that 70,000, and really giving a little bit of perspective in that space. So today we're going to be talking about a basic structure that's going to take you a lot of places, including staff roles at academic institutes, and I saw a handful of people were responding that they're interested in those. So big picture, I want to share what I've learned in the past 10 years of doing academic administration, and leave room for Q&A at the end, hopefully. And I believe we're recording, so I will make sure that there's a PDF of all of these slides for you after the lecture. So let's get going. So I want to take a minute to talk about that big framework. It's career exploration and job searching. And the goal here is to give you some scope about the entire process. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the job search process, which is really just these four. And I really do think it's good to take a minute and see that big picture, or the entire forest, before we're sort of diving in and dealing with particular trees. So the first 6 of these are that career exploration. They're things that you should ideally do before you start your job search. So the first is to take a little time for introspection to understand what you find interesting and value, and the skill set that you have. And second is really connecting with others and really figuring out, building relationships, particularly with those who are outside of academics, if that's your goal. And then, actually, I should have put those in the other order. Take time to just broadly research career paths and sort of sample what's out there. As we had the question today, right? There's some careers that you didn't even know that you could go, or sectors you didn't even know you could go to. And so we've asked questions, and we're going to unpack some of those over time. I say this is the global we, not me. I want to keep it as focused as possible. Focus. So we're jumping into the rest of this, right? So as you're networking and connecting with people, some of the time you're going to have a longer conversation or an informational interview. Really understand the details of day-to-day, what was useful for the person when they got into that role from their training, what they wish they knew. Both of those are fodder for 5 and 6 here, which is identifying what those opportunities are to learn something new, and then actually doing it, which are sometimes 2 different things. So I have separated them. But in that last 4 steps, right? Identifying jobs that you actually want to apply for. and then separating those from the ones that you know for sure that you do not want to apply for. It is okay to say no to a job ad. I promise they will not take it personally. The next piece there is that preparation of application materials, and that can be a lot of things. And I'm going to give you a slide that's got a bunch of different pieces that fall into this category. And our focus tonight is going to be there, right? Potential positions. So what does it mean to get through the entire process of application to interview, and what materials do we want to specifically talk about? Heavy emphasis on that resume and format and template. And then I know coming up is a session on interviews, and hopefully when you're done with that, you'll have multiple offers in your hand. You're going to have to figure out which one you want and then probably negotiate. So let's get to the exciting stuff. So figuring out what we want to do, right? So we're going to start with discussing identification of jobs, pardon me, what that application process looks like, how to read that job ad. So you're really prepared to tailor the resume. So I'm starting to give you that tailor, and I'm sure you've heard that before. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page when we get there. So we're going to have an example that's going to come through with us and get us to that space. So we're talking about that. So during that self-discovery phase, though, you're going to grow to understand your skills and interests, but also start to understand what kinds of career options are available. So this model combines those three so we can examine the intersections. And in the center where everything aligns is, magic job, right? Our dream job, our career of ultimate happiness that hopefully also pays us a lot of money and leverages all the wonderful things that we've learned along the way. Actually, leverages the things that we want to take advantage of that we've learned along the way. And I want to make a point of, you may have learned something that you do not want to do, and that is okay too. So as we're walking through this, right, like if you're in this intersections where you only have two of the three, you're going to run into different problems. So there either isn't a job opening, or there is a skill gap that you need to overcome, or you're doing something that you're qualified for, but you're really not interested, and frankly, you're going to burn out. So we want to avoid any of these intersections and get into that center spot, which is happy, right? I do want to mention, though, it is absolutely possible to create an option. So if you have an idea, you have to be very clear on it. You have to be able to communicate the need for that, and you have to sell it to the right person. Once upon a time, and Sudha may know this story because I've known Sudha for a lot of years. Once upon a time when I was on the postdoc council, I mentioned to an administrator, gosh, it'd be wonderful if I could step into a role and do this full time. That role did not exist at that time, and it didn't exist for 5 more years. However, it did start in 2012, and I interviewed for it and was selected. So that's how I got into this, but I inadvertently created the role because I had pitched the idea and sold them on the need. It just took the institution a really long time to capitalize on that. The other thing is, it's absolutely possible to gain new skills, and the ideal is that you do that before necessary, or before you're actually in the job search. Having it completely done is not a requirement. Just get started is my best advice in that space. So as you're researching, right, as you're preparing for that job search, you want to be able to evaluate opportunities, and you have a lot of opportunities that you can take advantage of. So you want to figure out what's right for you, and then have the time to tailor the resume and actually do the application. So as you're starting with this understanding of your skills and your interests, your guide that's guiding you towards these fields or career sectors that might interest you, that self-assessment is helping you pay attention to a couple of things. So things that you're good at, things that you want to do, things that you're going to say yes to, and then also equally things that you don't want to do right away. So there's 7 different things here that we can do in no particular order. So as we're talking today, I do want to highlight the last of these, which is working with recruiters, which is one of the next seminars that you guys have coming up in a couple of weeks. And Again, these other pieces that we've talked about. So number one is actually leveraging the data that was gathered right before we started talking, at the beginning, to figure out who we want to bring in and who do we want to talk to maximize impact, right? To invite the right people so that there's good audience, good questions, and good learning. As you attend those, make sure that you network with those individuals if they are in a career that you think is interesting. Have that deeper conversation, that informational interview. You can read a lot, absolutely. You can read job ads to explore this. You can do interns, fellowships, volunteer for different things. There's nothing that says you have to be paid for a job to gain skills. National Postdoc Association is a great example of that for me. I gained a lot of administrative level skills through service in that organization. But absolutely, working with recruiters can open up your eyes to a lot of different career options you may or may not have thought about, that they know because they're seeing this on a day-to-day basis and seeing candidates and talking to candidates on a regular basis. So big take home here, right? There's lots of different ways you can do this. So use the ones that are going to be best to help you get there. So some websites. I've had this question in the past, and as we have talked about different places to start to explore opportunities, I like that there's salary info specifically at salary.com and payscale.com. Those are pretty useful, but also LinkedIn and Glassdoor have decent info. Nothing's perfect unless you work for a state institution and you go out and you Google what people are making. That was certainly true when I was working in Texas. It's true now that I'm working in Florida. But most of the time you can absolutely talk with someone as you're doing that informational interview and just say, based on my research, I think the salary range is this, X to Y. Is that correct? It's very different than saying, how much do you make? Because they will answer the first question. They will not answer the second question unless they really know you and for a lot of years. But as you've asked that first question, if it's correct, they're going to confirm that. And frankly, you would know that they make something in that range, not exactly what, doesn't matter. If you're wrong, they'll correct you. In either case, you get good data that you can take forward into that actual interview. If you're talking to recruiters and they ask what your salary expectations are, you can give them the range. Again, you have confirmed info that that's correct. You're not going to give yourself something less than what you actually deserve in that role in the region that you're looking in, because you've asked that question ahead of time and you've done your research. So I like LinkedIn, Indeed, Simply Hired, and Glassdoor. They're aggregators, right? They grab a lot of data from a lot of places. There is no one-stop shop especially when you're actively looking for applying for jobs. So go in and set up all of those searches for yourself. Just have that information passively coming at you, and let the technology do the heavy lifting for you, especially once you've really narrowed down what you want to be looking at. Academically focused opportunities. So this is faculty positions, but also everything else that happens at academic institutions. Inside higher ed and higher ed jobs are two good ones, but so is HERC. So HERC is the Higher Ed Recruiters Consortium. So that's a bunch of people who work in HR at academic institutions, and their job is to hire. So they have their own job board, which is also a good one. Again, with these also, no single board has all of the opportunities. So set up your searches everywhere you go and just let that information passively come to you. Don't forget, if you really want to work for a specific organization, if you're geographically bound for some reason, look at those websites 100%. And then don't forget your professional societies too. So lots of good places that you can get lots of good information. And with that, I will say, across all of that data that's coming at you from all of these sources, so your career panels, the research that you're doing, the conversations you're having, ultimately you want to do a couple of things. Identify the skills that you need to have So do I know it? Do I need to start doing it? Figure out that skill gap. If it's necessary to do something with it, great. And if you don't need to, then make a decision if you want to or not. Totally fine. Try to the best of your ability, streamline your interests. If you are thinking about career sectors that are, 3 career sectors and they're in really truly diverging directions, it's going to be really hard to come up with resumes all the time that you're going to just keep changing and bouncing between them, in order to highlight the skills that each one of those sectors is really going to want you to focus on. If you're able to streamline, again, you're choosing one thing for right now, you're not choosing one thing forever, right? So your career step is a step. It is, you could totally take another step. And if you choose to go to a different career sector and a completely different path later, totally fine. And then it is absolutely okay to say no to things, close doors. You're temporarily closing them. There's only a few things that once you close that door that is really not possible to come back to. But even some of those are starting to change. So, a closed door is just that. It's just closed for right now. So jumping into that next step, right? So what happens when you've figured out what you want to apply to, and what does that process look like? So we've got an idea of a career sector. Maybe you've got a couple of jobs you're excited about. You're planning the application. So I want to talk about the application process and how to critically read those job ads so that you're prepared to tailor that resume and or cover letter. So when you read it, the technical skills are the easiest things to pick out. When you read a job ad, those are the things that you resonate with immediately, and in part because that's the stuff you do every day. We need to make sure that the documents we're putting together convey everything that the employer needs, though. So technical skills is just a piece of it. Non-technical is the other part. So what I recommend is printing that sucker out, highlighting all the technical skills. And if you look at all the words in between that you did not highlight, chances are you're going to start to see all of these non-technical skills popping out. So it might be themes around communication, project management, people management, collaboration. And once you start to see that jumping out, the next job ads that you read are you're gonna be able to pick up on all of these pretty quickly. So between those two, identify a couple. So let's say technical skills, project management, communication, and collaboration. Let's pick those 4. Those are pretty common for a lot of the different positions that we can do. The other thing that I like to recommend, if you're looking through that job ad and it's something you're really, really excited about, in the margin, you can strategically print it at 80%, and in the margin you can keep tabs of the skills and experiences that match up one-to-one with those bullets that are in that job ad. And when you're done, you can always do a quick check of your resume. Did I make sure to put all of these pieces in to the resume before you send it out? Now, another trick that I like for identifying key needs in a job ad is to use word clouds. So I do love a good word cloud. It is not built to combine the words that are all part of, let's say, communication, for example, nor will it keep words together like drug discovery or biomarker development. So you still have to use your brain, but you are brilliant and your brain is a difference engine. So you're going to be able to collect all those pieces together anyway. I like to create a word cloud with the job ad. I like to create a word cloud with the resume. And if they match reasonably well, you've done a good job of using their language, using the words that they use in their company or their sector. So Amazon, for example, likes to use the terminology matrix teams. Somebody else uses collaboration. Team, right, is the same kind of thing. But if you're applying to Amazon, you're going to want to say matrix teams. Over here, you might say interdisciplinary collaboration. Yay, right? It's the same thing. But use the words that they're giving you in their job ad. They are really clear about it. And part of the reason is this is the secret to beating the applicant tracking system. So this is for every organization, company, university. generally speaking. Their application process starts with you submitting your application through a computer system, the ATS. I promise it's not out to get you. It is filtering your resume for keywords. It is trying to determine how well you fit with the role to sort of filter the potentially thousands of applications down to a reasonable number that HR can actually handle. If you meet the threshold that was set, your resume gets to HR and it's on a person's desk. So research in this space shows that once it lands in that space, you have 6 or 7 seconds of their time. So I've given you the 2018 eye tracking study that was done with HR professionals. You can see the heat map. I love, the science of this, to see where they were looking so that you can understand where there's impact, right? So the first part is the quick 7 or 8 seconds. 6, 7, 7, 8. The earlier study was 7 to 8, frankly, not statistically significant. So the first half of the first page is what grabs their attention, right? You want to get their attention. You want to make it easy for them to be able to advance you. So if we're going to talk about the template and the structure, but if you have a broad overview of your general skill set and then you dive into professional experiences right about here, you're going to capture the lion's share of their attention as they're reading those broad general bullets that you have, matching up with technical skills, communication, project management, and collaboration that we talked about. We picked 4 things right off the bat. So as you talk about the skills and experiences that you have with each of those, you're showing that handshake, right? You're saying, the person is reading down the list and going, okay, we need this, we need this, we need this. Okay, great. Bring them in, right? Put them on the short list pile, which is exactly where you want to be. So once you get to that, it's forward to the hiring manager. Now, the hiring manager, again, is going to do that same quick look, right? If you've grabbed their attention, they're going to read all the way down. And you'll notice here, and I'm going to highlight this is like super dense block text. And you notice that there is no visibility on that whatsoever. So it is one of the don'ts. I try to focus on the do's, but this is one of the don'ts. So once it gets to that hiring manager, and they consider your application and they say, oh, we like you, bring you in for an interview. This document's entire goal is to get you to interview and be in front of them in person. Right? Now, there's a secondary path because I left a whole bunch of space in here, right? And I don't know if we have time. We probably don't have time for everybody to jump in and chime in. So your secondary path is your network, right? You have taken the time to build this network, leverage it, right? They can help you get your resume in front of the hiring manager. Even if it got stuck in the applicant tracking system or HR, if it's handed to the hiring manager, they can reach back through and pull it all the way to them. And you're in front of the hiring manager who's making this decision for interview, which is, this is really where you want to be. 2 paths. Okay, so now I did talk about tailoring or targeting. I've mentioned this before. I'm likely to say it again before we finish, but I want to share this analogy. So they need to know very specific things about you to understand your fit with that role, i.e. a glass of water. In a 2-page resume, they do not need to know everything you have ever done, ever, AKA the fire hose. Okay, now, where do we put all that stuff, right? Because your CV is probably 6 or 7 pages at this point. You have a lot of data about you, your accomplishments, and what you can do that doesn't necessarily fit with the 4 things that you absolutely need to tell them about and be focused about. Your LinkedIn profile, your ResearchGate, Scopus, Google Scholar. I mean, you could use the other ones. I prefer LinkedIn. You can put absolutely everything there that you can possibly think of. Chances are they're going to look up your profile. So we talked about application materials and the fact that that could be a lot of different things. So I want to take a second here to just talk about that. Your CV or resume is the primary document that you're going to be using. Again, resume for almost everything except faculty positions. Cover letters do appear with quite a few different roles. And I get questions about whether to include them if they're not required. If you have a spot that you could attach it, it doesn't hurt, right? A number of people do look at that. If it's missing, that's kind of a negative. So if it's required, please make sure you put it in. You can't know whether HR is going to read it. That's absolutely true. You can't know that the hiring manager is going to read it, but erring on the side of inclusion rather than exclusion is going to make sure that that extra content is there. And it's a way that you get to tell your story in story form as opposed to short, very bullet, right? Very terse, right? Because all of those have to be on point and quick bites of information. So let's see what else is here. So all of these statements are typically involved in faculty positions. The case studies is really used for consultancy. A lot of times you're giving a research talk that could be for a lot of different types of positions. Some will look at your LinkedIn profile. So I say go ahead and make sure that it's up to date as you are making your applications. And frankly, everything that you do today with these resumes and your bullets, you can take all of those and drop them into your LinkedIn and get double duty for them. And then I do note your references, and I do want to make one comment there. So as you are just about to push submit on your application, you do want to be talking to a couple of people who are going to be good references for you. You want to have the list ready or nearly ready so that if you get an interview pretty quickly after you hit submit, you're ready to have those interviews and then prep those individuals for being a reference. So it could happen in a matter of weeks. Typically it lasts a little bit longer than that. And you do actually have some time. And remind me to discuss how to prepare your references if I get to do that before we get to the end, because I have a couple of comments on that, but I don't want to belabor the point. So let's dive into resumes specific and talk about that template. So I promised best practices. If you know, these are broad and pretty relevant for every document that you're going to be preparing for pretty much every job. Your resume is 2 pages, but for any of your documents, right, you want to make sure your spelling and your grammar is on point. You want to make it easy to read. So 11-point Arial times 12. If you are using Arial, you get the bonus that Arial is one of the fonts that's been shown to be easier to read for people who have dyslexia. Again, we never know who's going to be looking at our documents. I do recommend that Arial 11 times 12 and standard margins. That's what we're typically used to seeing and reading. And frankly, the person who's going to be reading your documents is a generation older than you. So be kind to them, right? You want them to pass it through, get you to the interview stage. You don't want it to be, oh, I can't even hardly read this, and they toss it to the side. As you're bolding and underlining and using color or italics, right? Use that sparingly. If you use it all over the page, what happens is your eye is drawn around the page. And if it's too scattered, they're going to not see the information that they need to get their hands on right away. And again, they're going to set you aside. We talked about that F or E shape. They're looking for those major headers, right? They want to see that the document's flowing down. You want to draw their eye down. Metrics, for example, will draw your eye across. So numbers, percentages will grab your attention and draw your eye across the page. And then we talked about that blocks of text, right? I can't remember, I don't even know where it is. Simple formatting, please, consistent style. Try not to do that blocks of text. That's awful. Nobody will read it. So I know I get the question about years, and I get the questions about gaps. You all are in the position now where you have enough years of experience that you can talk about years. And if you had a couple of months of gap for whatever reason, if you're just using years, that's going to disappear. If you do you want to have that conversation with the person that you're talking with, it's a lot easier to have that now. It is one of the positive things that came out of COVID, because many different people experienced a mini gap here or there for a variety of reasons. And I don't think COVID itself was a good thing. I do think the technologies we have, the connectivity we have is one of the only positive pieces that's come out of it. So, and a lot more grace and understanding with regard to your resumes and where there may or may not be a gap. Okay, so I think we covered most of those. So let's talk about the big headers, right? So at the very top, you're going to have a header that has your personal contact information, and I'll jump through these in a second. The next major section should be something key skills, summary of qualifications, whatever you want to call it, that's fine. I'm just giving you some broad headers here, broad topics. Professional experience should follow that. Really should start right before the halfway mark, so that again, you're forcing them to draw their eye down the page and read more about you because they're interested in what you've got. Education is at the bottom, you'll notice, and I have a good reason for that. In part, you could potentially use 8 to 10 lines to describe your educational background. And in the very top half of your first page, you don't necessarily have the room for that. Good news is, though, if you put name, comma, degree, they know you have the degree that they're looking for very quickly, and they will find, I promise, they will find the details of your education at the end. Typically, one of those bullets on that job description is they want you to have a master's or they want you to have a PhD with a certain number of years of experience. They're not looking for all the details of that degree right off the bat. And so you can put it at the bottom. One email that you're willing to check on a regular basis. Don't let things go to your spam. Typically don't use your work email or your school email, because if you are near the end of a term or separating, or you get to graduation and you separate from the institution, you may or may not have access to that. So if you do have access, check your institution. Sometimes that varies. But if you lose all of those email conversations that you've had with different employers, or worse, if you graduate and then 2 days later you get please contact us for an interview, you're going to be really sad that you didn't know about that. Okay, one phone number, again, with a good voicemail, so that, with our cell phones these days, it's not a problem. Make sure that you've got a number that you have access to most of the time. I do like people putting their LinkedIn profiles there. I would ask that all of us go into our URL and customize that in LinkedIn. You can do that and get rid of all those extra garbage characters that LinkedIn likes to add to that. And then location is one of those things that is individual specific. So if you're geographically bound to the location that you want to stay in, put your city and state. That's great. If you want to signal to the employer that you are mobile and willing to relocate, don't put anything. They're going to know where you are, because once they get about halfway down the page, it's your current position and they know exactly where you're located. It's not a mystery. Okay, so let's jump into that next section. So the key skills, remember we talked about pulling out those 3 to 5 major job requirements. We picked 4 from the description that we haven't yet seen, and I've got pieces of that when we talk about bullets. But you want to have high-level bullets that are summarizing the skills that are relevant to those. So I say 5 to 7. I mean, if you had 8, it's okay, right? You're looking for bullets that are conveying one skill per bullet, and really, don't lump all of the communication pieces into one. Go ahead and give yourself, 2. Let's say you've got authored and co-authored X publications in interesting field Y, focused on interesting projects XYZ, or presented to diverse audiences at national and international conferences. Actually put in a number. It's even better, right? So as you're thinking about these pieces, right, you'll notice both of those, I gave you an example that start with that active verb in that skill set, right? So co-authoring is communication, right? Presenting, right, are those. And then I talked about experience, metric, or impact. And I think Alicia can share this for me. I posted the link early in the chat, but we'll ask to repost that. I like the list of 185 power verbs at the Muse. You can find the same list pretty much everywhere you look online. I like this particular list because it's broken down by how you would use the word in the context. And there's a specific section on research, which I think is a bonus. And they recognize that research is a thing and they're not nature, they're not science. So I was pretty excited when I saw that. Okay, so your next section is professional experience. I like to call this professional experience instead of research experience because frankly, if you have a volunteer role, it counts, right? It can absolutely be skill driving. These are broken down by those different roles that you've had over time. You can absolutely put them in chronological order or by relevance. So if you have something that was a little further back in your experience that you really want to highlight for a particular role that you're looking at, you can rearrange that. They've got the years, they're going to be able to figure out this came before this and all of that, but you're either focused on the skill set or you're focused on the chronologic, and it doesn't really matter. Use the one that's most impactful for you. Metrics show impact. By putting these skills that you have, again, tied back to those major four that or however many, but in this case, tie them back to the major four. Are they repeating some of the pieces that you had in key skills? Absolutely, but you're giving them the timelines that you were gaining these different skills. And that's important, right? They want to know not just that you have the skill, but how long, to what level are you likely to have a skill? If you talk about a major skill that's required for the job and it was for a 3-month summer research experience that you did when you were an undergrad, okay, well, you might not have anything that far back on your resume actually, but how much experience do you really have with that versus the skill sets that you're bringing forward that you've been doing for the past 5 years, right? So you want to be talking about those things, specific technical skills, specific assays that you use in a project, for example, all something that gets put into that experience metric impact, right? If you improve something or if you save money, again, you've got great impact or good metrics. You want to make sure that you're putting those technical skills that are involved or that you gained in every single one of those roles, the ones that are relevant to the job. So not everything that you know. So let's say you know 15 different techniques and they really want you to, they're really looking for someone to come in and do the 5. The other 10 you have are bonus. Make sure you focus on the 5. If you throw a couple of the extras in, that's great, but don't feel like you have to pack in all 15 because what they're after is to know that you have the 5 that they really need you to have. Okay. So, and I have an example later of the magic bullet list. So last piece here, if you have relevant honors, awards, publications, etc., they might fit in their own section. However, honors and awards, the number of publications, the number of presentations, those types of things that you've done, the skill set they're looking for is communication and achievement. So honors and awards underlines achievement with your skill set. So again, that goes with that timeline piece, right? I would rather see them put with the different roles that you've earned them rather than having them as a secondary thought at the bottom of page 2 or near the bottom of page 2 when it's, not really giving impact to the skill sets that you have. And then, like I said, last, education, absolutely simplified, right? What they really need to know is your degree, whether it was honors or not, program, university in the year you graduated. You do not need to tell them your GPA. If you had a 4.0, I'm so proud of you. If you had a 3.0, I'm still proud of you. You finished your degrees, and that is what's critical and important for what you're looking at and getting your next position. The skill sets you've gained over time, every single one of us has a unique skill set, and we're all going to be good at something. So we're all going to have a dream job out there, and we're all going to go get that. And I'm excited about that too. If you have extra certification, special coursework, stuff like that, you could totally tuck it into education at the bottom. So, best case, this is a 4-line piece at the bottom, which gives you maximum room to put all of those skill sets in there. So how do we write those bullets? So this I borrowed with permission. I was working with a client. It was a little bit ago now, but I borrowed this job description and her bullets and how we edited them over time. So they wanted someone with a PhD, several years of postdoc experience, some specific technical experience. And so her first bullet was, again, for the very, very top, right? The very first bullet that's coming in under key skills. I have 10 years of experience in academic and industry in cancer biology. And so I said, well, this is, let's enrich that, right? Like, let's give them some more of the context. So they wanted biomarker development, drug discovery. They wanted a little bit of that genetics. So we added all of those pieces in. And now this bullet is much more descriptive of her overall experience rather than just simple, right? The person who's reading this, and if they're only reading the top half, you want to give them as much as possible. So let's talk about some other ones that you might see. They might want you to independently design, conduct, analyze different types of experiments or work directly with internal and external scientists. Sometimes this is stakeholders, collaborators, right? Depending on what sector you're looking at. But your impactful bullets can start, design, conduct, analyze. I do these things, right? But you want to highlight the skill sets of that, right? So your tasks that you're handling every day have skills associated with them, right? Being able to conceive hypotheses out of thin air, sometimes it feels, but out of all of that literature that you're synthesized, right? We say I do research, but it's a bunch of things. So you start your bullets with these types of things. So you can just independently, absolutely, you probably were the one who was doing it. You could have been collaborating too, and that's okay. But your focus is that skill set, right? Design, conduct, analyze. Collaborate, right, is the skill that you want to communicate, not working directly, right? Go for your big words. It's okay. All right, so communicate. Oh, this is one of my favorites, right? Communicated scientific research and fill in the right blank. Diverse audiences, national and international conferences, receive travel awards. Boom, right? And even better would have been if I put a number in there. Okay, so I often see people say this: I'm an experienced researcher in evaluating whatever. Okay, yes, but at the beginning, you told them you had X years of experience, right? I have 6 years, I have 10 years. Okay, well, that is going to cover experienced. So start it with the skills, the active verbs that are skill driving, right? You were investigating and evaluating small molecule inhibitors. Okay, better way to say this. Now, I often see these, just a bullet list of technical skills. So it could be, SPSS, STAT.R, SAS, or worse. They spell out Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint. And please don't. The challenge with this list is that there is no metrics. There's no way for someone to read this and judge that you have any level of expertise beyond knowing how to correctly spell and capitalize these acronyms. That's challenging, right? That's not the message you want to give, right? So one of the bullets, have this stuff be up in the roles that you have, right? So if you've developed and optimized cell lines using these things, great. If this is what they're looking for, put it up to the top, right? Have it be in your first or second job description. That's all on page 1. Have pieces of this in that introduction key skills, and you're going to grab their attention and you're going to progress to interview. So we are to the end. I realized that was quite a lot. I realized that you may go back and rewatch this or write me later and ask questions, all fine. So we've talked about that broad framework. We've talked about how to get through the application process, how to read that job description and really truly take it apart. And then a little bit, and how to sort of put together that big picture structure for attention getting resumes. So once you've sort of pulled all those pieces together. I have 2 slides that I created out of content that I grabbed courtesy of Alicia. So I appreciate her sending me this content. As you're getting that first draft put together, right? Please know it's okay for it to be a terrible first draft. That's very Brene Brown. And if you haven't seen her TED Talk, I highly recommend it. Go to your resources, right? You have, if you're at Gladstone, Student and Alicia are resources for you. You can email Alicia your content and so I made you a nice little QR code so you can scan them really quick. You can have this later so that, again, you can just scan it quick and send what you need to. Book that 50-minute appointment if you want to have that one-on-one conversation. If you're at either Gladstone or UCSF, you can do 20-minute, 50-minute sessions. And then there's also a great set of resources that's out there on UCSF's website. I've used them in the past for sharing and pointing people at good examples, as I'm often asked for that sort of thing. So I will say thank you for your time and attention. I hope that this has given you some big picture perspective for the process. And as you're, getting to the point of, getting ready for that application, I hope that you have, better prep for meeting with your coaches, meeting with your peers, getting other feedback, and that this helps you take a small step towards that next career step. And please reach out to me if you have any questions, and there's a couple ways that you can connect with me. And I do appreciate the gift of your time. And before we leave, I want to put this up because I am excited that you guys have how to talk with recruiters and how to work with recruiters and how to prep for your presentation and interviews for industry coming up in the next couple of weeks. So I want to leave that with you guys and then open for questions. I think we have a few minutes.
Yeah, we have plenty of time. Thank you so much, Tracy, and thank you for the plug of these upcoming events. We have one question I saw in the chat that we can start with, but please use the time now if you had questions about your resume or about any of the content that Tracy covered. We have plenty of time to address that, either using the chat or unmuting. But I will continue the recording for a little bit for now, but if you'd rather ask a question off of recording, just let me know in a message and I will stop recording and we can have questions that way too.
I'm happy to do either. I'm glad that there's a question in the chat and it says, if you're a grad student, can you put PhD candidate instead of bachelor's for the degree in the header? Absolutely. You can do name, comma, PhD, and then in parentheses, expected with a date. So 5/22. It doesn't take up a bunch of characters. It'll also balance your name over the longer string of your phone number, email, and LinkedIn profile, right? That feels like it's super long with respect to your name. It lets them know, I'm looking, I have a dedicated graduation date. It's possible for you to be done ahead of that. All you need is a letter from your university that says, hey, I completed, degree requirements. I did that and I started famously or infamously started my first postdoc on April Fool's Day as I finished in March. And, that was interesting, but it happened to be the right day, the right day. And they started me on April Fool's Day. So it's possible to start before your graduation, and I didn't graduate till the end of May when the university had graduation, but I was getting a better salary for a couple of months. So it is possible. So quick answer. I'm sure that answered your question. Oh, no, my pleasure. Ooh, another excellent question. So is it worth applying to a job if you don't meet all the skill requirements? So there's interesting research in this space, and the best of the research, or I don't want to say the best of the research, the most rigorous of the research is slicing the data by gender. So most males will apply to jobs if they meet at least 50% of a particular job's requirements, and women won't apply to that same job unless they meet 80 or 90%. So sometimes I ask those percentages, I ask you to, spill what you think. That would have been a good poll, actually, right? What do you think? But in this case, right, you want to apply if you meet at least half of the major requirements. Apply. You never know. Sometimes things are titled, especially right now. I'm seeing a lot of jobs that are dual titled. So scientist and senior scientist, one job ad. They're going to take whoever they find with the best qualifications and then slot them into the right job title. So you might feel like you're reading it and going, oh, well, senior would require extra years of experience. I kind of don't have that. So what do I do with this, right? Apply. If you have your network connecting you to that position, that's going to be even better. You can ask some of those questions ahead of time, right? Can I talk with the hiring manager as not a formal interview, but as an informal, ask them for coffee, right? Have that connection, have a quick conversation about that. But in the case where you match, at least half of the major requirements, don't sweat the small stuff. This is, well, actually, I'm gonna say that. So when managers write these job descriptions, they are sitting and thinking, if I could have the perfect candidate, I would want all of these things, right? Well, that person doesn't actually exist. That person is a unicorn. They're not real. Like, unicorns don't exist. So if you're thinking about that, right, connect with the major points. If you're not considered, that's a shame, right? And there will be some that you will apply to and never hear back from. There will be some that you apply to and you get interviews and then you won't be selected. And then there's going to be some jobs that you are interviewed for, selected for interview, and you get a job offer. And hopefully, again, like I said, you get to the end of your job search and you've been doing it all, multiple job applications, all going at the same time, multiple interview cycles. So you get the chance to pick. Okay. Sometimes I think that's the best, right? If you get to pick. Sometimes you have a job offer in hand and your other interview isn't for another week and you have to make a decision about the first one before you'll even know anything about the second one. That's really challenging. In that case, reach out to that group and say, hey, I've got an offer. I'm actively looking at opportunities and I'm really, you are my number one job, if that's true. And then sometimes they can scoot up your interview and rush you through the process if they're really interested in you. If you decide that you really want this first job and you know that the interview is coming up, go ahead and cancel it. Save them the time, right? Give them their time back. That's a blessing. So I hope I've answered the skill requirements. I can also say, depending if we just slice and dice this with other dimensions of diversity, we will see those same gaps, right? People feeling like I don't quite fit this enough, and for a variety of reasons. And, all I'm going to say is own your experiences. Make sure you have great mentors around you who are honestly, telling you all of the amazing things that you can do and supporting you as you're looking at those next positions.
Tracy, I have a
Suda and Alicia are both of those. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question actually, and it's regarding the header. That little section at the top that some people have that I see more and more. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit more in the way of tips on that. How do we go about drafting that header? What are we trying to pay attention to there? What are the important things to catch the interest with that header at the top?
So key skills. Yes. Okay. So you're really trying to hit the major big picture pieces that they're looking for. So if we were assuming technical skills, communication, collaboration, and project management, right? A bullet that talks about years of experience in your field with expertise or focus in project XYZ, right? Design of experiments, or, using techniques, or, whatever helps grab attention, that whatever's in that job description, focusing it back in on that bullet, right? Or bullets. As you're talking about project management, right? Like being able to say that you've worked on, 3 projects a year for the past couple of years, right? Or that you're focused in multiple projects, multiple sectors. They're not all going to be first author papers, right? And that's okay. The people who are looking and evaluating you aren't looking for a major paper, or I should say the magic paper, right? They're not looking for the thing that we all think that we're still shooting for and still trying to get to. They're looking for the fact that you can communicate and you can write and present and communicate, right? That persuasively communicate. They're not necessarily looking for those pieces. So it really is attention of the broader experience that you've had. So, if you're talking about authoring and co-authoring, it's all of the publications you've had over all of your different, so grad and postdoc, let's say. You may have had some papers as an undergrad. So it's all of that, right? If you are thinking about collaboration, right? Talk about the rich experiences that you've had. It could be multiple cultures in your lab. It could be multiple labs. It could be multiple universities. It could be global, right? Science is a global enterprise. So let's talk about all of those wonderful experiences that we have, and the fact that we can, communicate across culture, and that's a hallmark of people who are in science, and that is a skill set can be taken to so many different career sectors. That, I mean, it's a valued skill set, and we take it for granted, right? I know that the key skills piece is always the hardest. I always like to take those big picture skills and start with that. If you've run down the edge and the margin and thought about your different experiences over time, you're just collecting them and putting those into sort of summary at the top. So it's like your abstract of your paper, if you want to think about it that way. And then each of those roles underneath is chapters in your book, or chapters in your or sections of your paper. You want to think about it that way.
Yeah, I realize I think that question also could apply to the about, which sometimes takes the form of a couple of sentences. That's sort of that's actually what I was imagining, but I realized that it applied to what you were describing about the key skills as well. But that like couple of sentences, is it useful to have that kind of about, where we say experienced researcher seeking blank? Is that useful, or is that taking up space that they see that kind of sentence all the time? Or is it what are your thoughts on that about section utility, how to make that impactful, or when it might be necessary or not necessary?
So these are people in a hurry, right? So if they have to read a block of text that's all sentences, they're going to skip it. And then it's a waste of space. And I don't mean to say that in a negative way. Your experiences are all really valid and valuable, and I don't want that lost in translation, right? About as a section comes in, it's on your LinkedIn profile, right? But you can put bullets in that space. And then it's bite-sized, right? It's individual skill bites, and they can get through that pretty quickly. You can put, I think in LinkedIn, we have the grace of putting in that first person narrative, like we would do in a cover letter, right? So you can pull pieces from your cover letters, pull pieces from this resume, and put those and sort of blend it in that space. If you opened up the block, the about, and it was like a wall of text, I think you'd lose people. You might read the first couple of sentences in there and we're like, okay, yeah, well, okay. You put a lot of time and effort into those things. I'm not saying my current profile is perfect. In fact, I have a LinkedIn lecture tomorrow and I need to go in and try and clean some of it up because I'm sure there's reasons why pieces of it are broken, and I will talk about it tomorrow, and my postdocs will be like, but you did this thing. Yeah. Okay. I do not claim to be perfect. That is 100% true. So if you find errors in my LinkedIn profile, please message me and I will fix them. So I hope that, I hope that the discussion, a little bit more discussion about that key skill section, it really is big picture, grab attention. The other thing that you can think about that is it's kind of your tell me about yourself, right? If you had to very quickly, so in a 20 or 30-minute phone interview, or 15 even, you get 30 seconds to a minute to say that. If you said that, you would want to hit, I'm super excited about your role. It requires 1, 2, 3, 4, and my experiences in this space are this, right? And if you can communicate that really quickly, it's kind of the same thing. Obviously don't read what you wrote on your resume. They've already read that. But you do want to give them sort of that big picture experience of walking them through the pieces that are most relevant to them caring about you as a candidate for that role. Even if they did read it, it may not have been right before they talked to you. So I'm not saying you have to come up with completely new text. A blended conversational style of your bullets is most appropriate. Those bullets get pretty terse after a while. So any other questions? I did really leave us a lot of time, didn't I?
Yeah. No, but I think it's good to be able to have the breathing space, and nobody would be sad about a little extra time afterwards. I think if there's no more questions, I'm happy to wrap up. Please join me in thanking Tracy for this talk. Thank you for taking time out of your day at the end of a long day on the East Coast to talk to us at Gladstone. And thank you all so much for coming.